Thank you very much to the organizers, to the committee for inviting me and giving me a chance to share some of the thinking that I and my colleagues have been doing over the last few years, particularly in the context of schools. So I'm aware that some of you, at least in the audience today, will be more preoccupied with further and higher education. And I hope to be able to address some of the different concerns that you would have. But my natural habitat, so to speak, is to do with schools. So I was very pleased to hear the introduction puts as much emphasis on schools as on higher education. So I'm very interested in pedagogy, in the importance of how we teach, not just what we teach, but how we teach. And my starting point is a very simple one, really, which is that there's no such thing as good teaching. There's no such thing as good teaching in exactly the same way as there's no such thing as a good tool. Is a hammer a good tool? Well, it depends. Yes and no. If you want to put a nail into a piece of wood, it's a good tool. If you want to put some tiles up in the bathroom, it's not a good tool. So teaching, in order to answer the question, what is good teaching, we have first to specify teaching for what? What's the job? Or to put it in the way that the Singapore Ministry of Education puts it, what are the desirable outcomes of education? No school that I've ever come across, that I've yet come across, says on its website, on the homepage of its website, send me your child, send us your child, and we will do everything in our power to squeeze the grades out of the kids, to make them a good statistic in the PISA tests, and we will do this whatever the cost, and we will do nothing else. I haven't yet met a school that says that. Schools are all interested in the results, the conventional results, but everywhere you look, there is some language, some rhetoric about what else they're delivering, what else they're providing, what other desirable outcomes of education they're thinking about. So no educational institution that I'm aware of is only interested in results. Everybody always says they're interested in what I call results plus. But the question is, what is the plus? And what are the implications for pedagogy, for the way we configure the cultures in our schools, for the way we talk to kids, to students, for the way we design activities, if we're going to take the plus seriously? If we're not clear about what the plus is, then we may by default, if we fall back, as many students' experience is, into acting as if the only thing we cared about was the results, the PISA tables, the university entrance statistics, the scholarly roll of honor on the wall in the school hall. If we fall back on that, then we don't know. We may even be having a negative effect on the other characteristics, other desirable outcomes of education. I've not yet met a teacher who gets up in the morning with a smile on her face and a spring in her step, saying to herself, goody, another opportunity to go into school and do everything I can, everything in my power, to help children become more passive, more compliant, more docile, more only interested in the grade, more unimaginative, more unadventurous. I can't imagine anybody saying that that was their intention, yet for lack of clarity about what their real intention is, many institutions and many teachers have had that effect on young people. And we can tinker with the rhetoric, as the introduction showed. We can tinker with the rhetoric, we can tinker with the PISA tests. But if the underlying pedagogy is not explicitly designed in the light of the plus, in the light of what the other desirable outcomes are than the grades, the tests, the university entrance, then there's a very real risk that we will end up delivering results minus. Results with people who are more conservative, less adventurous, less creative, less imaginative, less collaborative. In other words, we will be delivering, whilst with our passion for the results, our mesmerization by PISA will end up delivering not education, but miseducation, because we haven't thought through the effects on the daily life, what the poet John Keats called the minute particulars of children's experience in school. And you can paste whatever you like over the top. But if we haven't paid attention, if we haven't gone back to first principles and said, so how am I going to teach adding fractions or the periodic table or the subplots in Othello or some skills necessary for medicine or engineering in the light of the fine words about what the plus is? If we haven't thought that through, then we should not be surprised that we're investing more and more money and having no effect. We might as well be setting fire to enormous piles of euro notes or pound notes or dollar notes or whatever. So what is the plus? What is it that people are delivering? Well, broadly, as we all know, it's things to do with habits of mind, with 21st century skills, broadly things to do with character. But a lot of the language is very coarse, very full of wishful thinking, very imprecise, and therefore, again, it's not surprising if an ordinary, hard-working teacher is unclear about my school's commitment to helping all young people fulfill their potential. If as an ordinary working maths teacher, I don't know what that means for how I'm supposed to be behaving differently on Monday morning. And that's the hard work that Young and I and Michael Fullan and Ron Berger and David Perkins and lots of the good guys out there in education are trying to work their way through. What are those minute particulars that make a difference, and what is it that we're trying to help young people become? Well, when you use the word character, most people tend to think of what you might call the pro-social virtues of character. Of course, we would like to be turning out young people who are cheerful, who are dispositionally kind, who are honest, who are trustworthy, who are not going to post embarrassing pictures of their friends on Instagram, who are generous, who have intellectual humility. One of the most powerful predictors of people's learning progress is intellectual humility. So how are we teaching that? How do I teach Spanish history differently if I'm not just teaching for the grades, but I'm teaching for the development of intellectual humility? If I'm teaching for the development of pleasure in reading? There's been an awful lot of fuss, hasn't there, about trying to raise literacy rates, levels of reading ability. In the recent history in the UK, where I come from, there was a lot of time and energy and money put into, in primary school, something called the National Literacy Hour. When that was evaluated, the effect of this program, this drive to push up levels of reading ability, they discovered that there had been two effects. One was a small increase in pupils' reading ability, and the other, a marked decrease in their pleasure in reading. There was an article in the newspaper, the Sunday newspaper, yesterday's newspaper that I was reading on the plane coming over yesterday, showing how pleasure in reading in young people continues to drop, continues to plummet. Yet we know that pleasure in reading is one of the most powerful learning tools for building humanity, for building empathy, for building the ability to adopt multiple perspectives, for building tolerance, and so on. So the narrow-minded, bean counter-driven attempt to lever up levels of reading ability is achieved through miseducation, through the cost of one of the most powerful predictors of success in life, which is pleasure in reading. But it's not only good people that we want to try and produce, when we unpack the plus. Schools are about learning. And therefore, I think we ought to be, schools' special terrain, special province, is building young people who are good learners, who have the phrase that's beginning to be used is not just pro-social character, but epistemic character. People who are good in uncertainty, who are not frightened of complexity, who are able to think with clarity and nuance, to bring to bear the requisite degree of cognitive complexity on problems of real complexity. We're bedeviled at the moment around the world by world leaders whose cognitive bandwidth seems to be so limited that they shrink real, complex, difficult, contested, multiple, systemic problems to fit their own narrow level of intellect. Well, I don't care that they've become president of this or that country. For me, they're failures of the education system. If we're sending out young people who can't think systemically, who can't think with the requisite complexity about difficult things, they make the world a more dangerous place for all of us. So we want to build epistemic character. We want to build what I call, in the work that I've been doing for many years now, what I call learning power. That ability to what the writer Ernest Hemingway called grace under pressure. The ability to stay intelligent when things get tricky, get frustrating, get difficult, get complicated. Okay, sir, so how am I going to teach Spanish differently on Monday morning then, if I'm building epistemic character, is for me the key question. It's not about fancy bits of technology, though technology may help. It's not about investing $25,000 in a Harkness table so we can all sit round a large fancy oval table. You can have exactly the same effect by putting the chairs in a circle. We don't have to fetishize these products that are out there. So learning power, what does it consist of? We need to get a little bit sharper, don't we? Curiosity. Do schools boost curiosity, or do they shrink curiosity? Before a 4-year-old goes to school, on average, she's asking 100 or 200 questions a day. After 3 weeks in primary school, she's asking 2. Job well done? Price worth paying for getting her to sit still and shape her letters and begin to learn how to add fractions, though who the hell needs to add fractions these days? Nobody knows. Adventurousness. I was delighted to find myself in a school the other day in England whose school motto was live adventurously. I like that. It has some power to it, doesn't it? It has some energy. Live adventurously, not recklessly, but adventurously. Okay, so where do we draw the line? How do we keep that value under review so it doesn't tilt into something that is destructive? Skeptical. Being skeptical is a very important part of being curious, isn't it? If I had a 12-year-old daughter, I would want her, when she goes online, to have a little subroutine in her mind that automatically clicks in, saying, hold on a minute, who's telling me this? In whose interest is it that I believe this? Is this person who they say they really are? What question could I ask of this person I'm chatting to get them to reveal whether they are indeed another 14-year-old girl, another 12-year-old girl, or whether they're someone with much more harmful intent? Who wants me to buy this? In whose interest? Don't you think that that's a fundamental part of onboard safeguarding in the 21st century? So how are you asking me to teach history differently then if we're valuing the development of that not cynical, but that skeptical mindset, that questioning mindset? Once you pose that question, it's not hard to answer. It requires us to change our habits a little bit, to treat the history textbook with less respect, with less reverence. But if we carry on treating the history textbook as if it were the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you have to swear in English courts when you're giving testimony in the court, if we carry on implicitly but powerfully treating the textbook as if it were unquestionably right, are we not contributing to building that attitude of credulity which makes young people vulnerable, which makes them uncritical in the face of authoritative-looking text or the voice on the phone that says, hello, I'm calling from Microsoft. We think your computer has some problem. You need that flag, don't you, to go up in your head saying, hold on a minute, who's telling me this? How do I find out? How do I probe whether this is a genuine call or whether it's a scam? We need young people to be determined. We all know about the Holy Trinity. People have fallen in love with the Holy Trinity of resilience, grit, and growth mindset. Of course they're important. What do they mean? Staying intelligently engaged with difficult things for longer. Good idea. I would want my children to have that, not to be snowflakes, not to give up at the first kind. I can't do these sums. Will you help me, Mummy? No, do it yourself. Tough love. Spend another 5 minutes, and if you really, really, really can't do it, then I'll come and help you. So, building resilience, building that ability to stay intelligently engaged. Building what's called buoyancy is the fashionable word in psychology. The ability to bounce back from unexpected disappointment or failure or frustration. Patience in the face of difficulty. Having that sense of being on for the long haul. So how do we build that? So obviously you don't build resilience just by putting up some pretty posters around the classroom or quoting Carol Dweck for umpteen times a day. You build resilience by giving children an increasing diet of complexity to grapple with, don't you? But do we do that? Do we make lessons difficult enough, particularly for low-achieving students? Or do we think misguidedly that because they come from difficult backgrounds, because their levels of literacy are not high, because their levels of achievement are low, that we need to protect them from difficulty and thereby miseducate them by locking them in to their lack of resilience? Locking them into a mindset which says, if I can't do it in 5 seconds, I'll never be able to do it, so I might just as well give up. So how are you asking me to teach my maths differently then on Monday morning? Imaginative, resourceful, creative, empathic, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, adopt multiple perspectives. History is a wonderful engine for that, but do we use it consciously, explicitly, for the development of those characteristics. The development of intuition, a field in psychology, I'm a cognitive scientist, field in psychology that I'm very interested in. We know that the quality of people's real-life decision-making is predicted, significantly predicted, by how accurately, how sensitively they sense the internal workings of their own bodies. Isn't that interesting? The quality of our introspective awareness, or body sense, is a very important ingredient of knowing how to make good decisions. Decisions that are wholesome, decisions that are going to carry forward our values, our true values. So where are we teaching that? In physical education? Or is it all about running around and winning trophies? Building the ability to be rational, to plan, to organize, to be clear, to be precise, to be articulate. Are we coaching in our English lessons and Spanish lessons young people's oracy as well as their literacy? How much energy are we putting into that? Lots and lots of schools in England at the moment are busy doing that, but not all, still only a minority, are deliberately, systematically coaching youngsters' ability to be good speakers as well as good writers. Building the capacity for collaboration. How do you build that? How do you build someone's capacity to be a good discussant? And how to do that in a lesson on ionic and covalent bonding. Not say, oh, well, all this character stuff, that's to do with games and the school orchestra and drama and incidental stuff, the co-curriculum rather than the core curriculum. Building the capacity to be self-aware, to be alert to your own biases and beliefs so that you can hack your own mind to be more objective, more fair-minded, less driven by your own unconscious biases, which we all are. So are we building that through our educational institutions, our organizations? So how do you do it? What's the answer to that hard-pressed teacher who says, yes, I agree with all this stuff about 21st century skills. Please don't call them non-cognitive skills. Please don't call them soft skills. A lot of the words almost lead us to consider these things to be second class, non-cognitive. Well, it can't be as good as cognitive then, can it, if we don't have it, if they don't have their own word. Soft skills. Oh, so not very hard then. We need to be careful about the language we use in this territory to describe things. So how do we do it? Well, we know a lot about how not to do it these days. You don't do it through empty phrases. No disrespect to Young, but phrases like world class, if you don't explain what you mean by that. Empty, meaningless phrases like excellence for all. To excel means to do better than most other people. So excellence for all is a non sequitur. To help youngsters fulfill their potential. Well, what the hell does that mean? Have you fulfilled your potential? No, seriously, have you? Can you remember when it happened? You remember what you were doing at the time? Yes, last September, I was sitting with my wife and drinking gin and tonic, watching Strictly Come Dancing, and then suddenly I felt there I was. I'd fulfilled it. That was it. It was all over. It's nonsense. There's no way in which parents can hold your school, can hold the feet to the fire if you don't know what the hell you're talking about, if there's no way of operationalizing what those other desirable outcomes of education are. Motivational posters won't do it by themselves. Sticking up posters saying, don't say can't yet, and all that kind of flim-flam, what a colleague of mine calls the cheesy growth mindset posters. Don't do it by themselves if there isn't an underlying shift in the culture, in the pedagogical culture of the school. We don't do it by tacking on occasional bursts of creativity. English primary schools are very good at every so often they have medieval week or Victorian week or something or other. And there's a frenzy of singing and dancing and rehearsing and cutting out. And there's a performance on Friday that the parents love. And the following Monday morning, pedagogy as usual. Back to the same old, same old. No lasting shift to the undertow of lessons, which says, we want you to be compliant. We want you only to get right answers. We want you to do what you're told. We want you not to be critical. And not shifting that undertow in the other direction. We don't do it by sprinkling a few little hints and tips, by mind maps and dividing kids into visual, auditory and kinesthetic learners, or telling them to drink water all the time, or talking to them in some kind of neurobabble. We have to get more serious than that. So a lot of the work that we've been doing recently is to begin to think, what are the design principles of the learning-powered classroom? In which, yes, we want kids. It's not neglecting the results. We want kids to do well, to learn how to divide decimals by a whole number, and to be able to do that accurately, to be able to analyze a passage of text, to be able to translate from Spanish into English. We want all that. But it's the subtext, it's the plus that we need to be paying attention to as we do that. So, as I say, a lot of the work that we've been doing, what my group refer to as the learning power approach, though you can find exactly the same ideas in Ron Richart's Cultures of Thinking, in Ron Berger's Expeditionary Learning Schools, in Michael Fullan's Deep Learning, in many of Yong's books. There's no shortage of ideas out there about what it takes, what the design principles are, which we need to be clear about so that we can shift our pedagogical habits so that we're producing young people who are tooled up appropriately for the challenges of 21st century life. First, make it safe to be a learner. Being a learner means having a go, means venturing, means not knowing if you can get it right yet. There's an awful lot of classrooms where it is not safe to be a learner. It's only safe to be a performer. So helping children understand that distinction, I'll talk more about this in the workshop, helping children understand that distinction, telling them explicitly, I want you to be in learning mode now, which means be creative, come up with ideas, be half-baked, try things out, do trial and error, get it wrong, reflect on it, have another go, accept critique each other. And there will be occasions when I also want you to be in performance mode because you're getting ready for your exams and you've got to do well. Just like a football team does different things when they're practicing from the way they play on Saturday afternoon or Sunday night. They're behaving differently. When you're in performance mode, you behave differently from when you're in learning mode. But many teachers haven't understood that simple distinction yet. And by default, they create a performance mode culture in their classrooms in which people think that if they make a mistake, it means they're stupid. And it's down to us. It's not to do with their home background or indigenous culture or whatever. It's down to us whether we create that muddled or misguided culture in our classrooms inadvertently, unwittingly, unintentionally, or whether we don't. Secondly, make activities challenging and adjustable. Do you know how challenging your students are finding what you're doing? Do you have little ways, which lots of schools do, lots of you will do, 2 or 3 times a lesson to get the students to show you very quickly whether they're finding what they're doing too hard, too easy, or just right. Just right means I'm struggling, I can't do it perfectly, but I'm making progress. I'm fine, leave me alone, we're going to nut this out, we're going to work it out for ourselves. But if too many of your students are in the green zone, are finding it easy peasy, so they're not learning anything, or they're in the red zone, they can't get a handle on it, it's too far from what they can currently do, then you don't know, but they're wasting their time. Learning is not happening unless students are in the learning zone. Third, lots of student talk. We know that exploratory talk between students is one of the most powerful engines of building learning that there is. And we also know that lots of students are not very good at it when they arrive in our classrooms or our seminar rooms, so we have to coach it. We have to talk about what makes a good discussion partner, what makes a good talk partner. We give people feedback just in the same way that a football coach will work on developing particular skills. That becomes part of our role. Fourthly, we talk about the innards of learning. We explore works in progress. We make the process of being a learner interesting. We adjust the layout of the room. We might put the chairs in a circle or in small groups. We might not put people in a lecture theatre, or we might find ways of mitigating those effects. We might put different things on the walls. We might not only display the students' finished products, but we might display some of their drafts to demonstrate the learning process, to make them interested in the travelling and not just the arriving. We might adjust assessment so that the focus of assessment is always not on snapshots of performance, but on the gradual development of improvement, on capturing progress. All of these things are perfectly easy to do. Many schools are doing them already, but we haven't got to scale yet. We haven't opened up the fundamentals, the basics, the minute particulars of pedagogy, anything like as broadly and as deeply as we can. We've learned an awful lot about how to do it, and I'll be interested to hear in the other discussions that we have in the workshops and in the Meet the Speakers, some of the ideas that you're implementing already in your own practice, day to day, little things that make a difference, that shift the undertow. From whatever I say, the undertow is drawing you towards compliance, to everything that we do in this room is drawing you towards the inclination to read widely and to live adventurously. Thank you very much.